What if the greatest spiritual attack against your life isn't a temptation? What if it isn't bad luck? What if it isn't even the obvious sins you keep trying to overcome? What if the attack has become so normal that you no longer recognize it as an attack? Here's a frightening thought. Many Christians spend years praying against external enemies while quietly losing a battle inside their own minds. Not because they don't love God, not because they don't read the Bible, but because the enemy rarely announces his presence. He whispers, he suggests, he plants thoughts. And over time, those thoughts begin to sound like your own voice. The dangerous part? By the time most believers notice what's happening, the attack has already shaped their emotions, decisions, relationships, and even their view of God. And if you're not careful, this hidden battle can steal years of your spiritual growth without you ever realizing it. But before we expose it, there's something most people never understand about how spiritual attacks actually work. When people hear spiritual warfare, they often imagine dramatic situations.
Dark forces, terrifying encounters, visible battles. But Scripture points to something much more subtle. Ephesians 6 tells us that our struggle is not against flesh and blood. The battle is often invisible. And here's what most people never realize. The enemy doesn't always attack your circumstances. Sometimes he attacks your perception. The goal isn't always to destroy you overnight. The goal is to slowly disconnect you from truth. One thought at a time. One assumption at a time. One lie at a time. A lie repeated long enough begins to feel like reality. You pray less, trust less, hope less, dream less. Not because God has left you, but because you started believing things God never said. The enemy understands something that many Christians overlook. If he can influence your thoughts, he can influence your actions. If he can influence your actions, he can influence your future. And that leads us to the hidden attack most Christians ignore. The attack on their mind. Not possession, not oppression, but deception. A battlefield that many believers never learn to recognize. And once you understand this, you'll begin noticing signs that may have been hiding in plain sight. Imagine waking up one morning with a simple thought. I'm not good enough. It seems harmless. But then another thought follows. Maybe God is disappointed in me. Then another. I'll never change. Then another. What's the point of trying? Soon, a single thought becomes a stronghold. There are 5 warning signs, and the 5th one surprises people the most. Sign number 1, constant spiritual exhaustion. You sleep, you rest, yet your soul feels tired. Prayer feels difficult. Worship feels forced. The Bible feels distant. You still believe, but something feels heavy. Many believers assume this is normal. But sometimes the battle is targeting your spiritual energy. Not to remove your faith, but to drain your passion. The consequence? You begin surviving spiritually instead of growing spiritually. And that's exactly where the enemy wants you. Sign number 2, isolation. The attack often pushes people away from godly relationships. You stop answering messages. You avoid church. You pull away from community. You tell yourself you're just busy. But over time, isolation becomes loneliness. And loneliness becomes vulnerability. A sheep separated from the flock becomes an easier target. The spiritual consequence is dangerous. Without realizing it, you lose encouragement, accountability, and perspective. Sign number 3, believing the worst about yourself. You focus more on your failures than God's grace. You replay old mistakes. You relive old embarrassments. You carry guilt that Jesus already paid for. Instead of conviction leading to growth, condemnation leads to paralysis. The consequence? You stop seeing yourself through God's eyes. Sign number 4, losing hope for change. You begin saying things like, "This is just who I am. I'll always struggle with this. Nothing is ever going to improve." Hope starts disappearing. Faith becomes routine. Dreams shrink. The spiritual consequence is devastating. Because hopeless people stop expecting God to move. Sign number 5, distorted thoughts about God. This may be the most dangerous sign of all. You still believe God exists, but your view of him changes. You see him as distant, harsh, disappointed, uninterested. Suddenly, prayer feels unsafe. Trust feels difficult. And intimacy with God begins fading. The enemy knows something powerful. If he can distort your view of God, he can weaken everything else. And nobody understood this battle better than Elijah. Elijah had just witnessed one of the greatest miracles in Scripture. Fire fell from heaven. God demonstrated his power. Victory was undeniable. You would think Elijah would feel unstoppable. Instead, something shocking happened. One threat arrived. One message. One moment of fear. And Elijah ran. The prophet who stood boldly before crowds suddenly hid alone in the wilderness. He became exhausted, discouraged, isolated. He even questioned whether his life still mattered. The attack wasn't merely external, it became internal. But God didn't abandon Elijah. God met him, strengthened him, spoke to him, corrected his perspective, and reminded him that he wasn't alone. Then Elijah returned to his purpose. God didn't just change Elijah's circumstances, he renewed Elijah's thinking. And maybe that's exactly what some viewers need today. And this is how you can do this. Step 1, identify the lie. Ask yourself, what thought keeps repeating? What fear keeps controlling me? What belief keeps pulling me away from God's truth? You can't defeat a lie you haven't identified. Step 2, replace it with Scripture. Every lie must be confronted by truth. If the lie says, "God has abandoned me," remember, "I will never leave you nor forsake you." If the lie says, "I am worthless," remember, you were created in God's image. Truth breaks deception. Step 3, stop fighting alone. Isolation strengthens attacks. Community weakens them. Talk to mature believers. Seek wise counsel. Invite accountability. Light exposes what darkness tries to hide. Step 4. Develop daily spiritual disciplines. Not out of obligation, out of protection. Prayer, scripture, worship, gratitude. These habits keep your mind aligned with truth. Small daily victories create long-term strength. Conviction says, come back. Condemnation says, stay down. God corrects. The enemy condemns. Learn the difference. And choose agreement with God's voice. Maybe you've been fighting a battle nobody else can see. Maybe you've smiled while carrying fear. Maybe you've worshiped while wrestling with doubt. Maybe you've prayed while feeling exhausted. And maybe you've wondered if God sees any of it. He does. Every tear, every struggle, every silent prayer, every moment you chose faith when quitting felt easier. The very battle you're facing may be evidence that your faith matters. The enemy doesn't waste energy attacking what poses no threat. Your future matters. Your calling matters. Your purpose matters. And God's plan for your life is bigger than the lies you've been hearing. The darkness may be loud, but truth is stronger. Fear may be persistent, but God's promises are greater. And what feels like the end of your story may actually be the beginning of your breakthrough. So here's the question. What thought have you accepted as truth that God never said? What belief has been quietly shaping your life? What lie has been sitting in your mind for so long that it feels normal? Because the hidden spiritual attack most Christians ignore is not always around them. Often, it's within the battlefield of their thoughts. And the moment you recognize the lie, you can begin replacing it with truth. The moment truth enters, freedom begins. If this message spoke directly to your situation, write, "I choose truth" in the comments. Share one battle you've been overcoming so others know they're not fighting alone. If this video encouraged you, share it with someone who may need this reminder today. And subscribe for more content on spiritual warfare, Christian growth, biblical wisdom, and renewing the mind. Because your journey isn't over. Your story isn't finished. And God's truth is still stronger than every lie you've believed.